Politics. A poem by the Irish poet William Butler Yeats, 1938. How can I, that girl standing there, my attention fix on Roman or on Russian or on Spanish politics, yet here's a traveled man that knows what he talks about, and there's a politician that has both read and thought, and maybe what they say is true of war and war's alarms. But oh, that I were young again and held her in my arms. Kiev, Kiev, how often have I desired to gather your children together as a hen gathers her brood under her wings. In this time of global communications, there is very little we can avoid finding out about. Yet most of the time, we are able to keep much of the world's suffering distant from us. Yet once in a while, a terrible event, far away as it may be, creeps into our own homes and hearts and stirs us up, as are the events in Ukraine. It is a war of terror and brutality against innocent people by an evil man and an evil regime. The stories unfolding before us are wrenching. Our hearts cry out for the people to be protected, for the children, for mothers, for the elderly. The steadfastness, courage, and patriotism of ordinary Ukrainians make us yearn for their safety even more. Yet we also cry for young Russian soldiers forced to participate in this campaign of evil. And we want it to stop. We want the world's leaders, including our own, to just fix it, to make it go away. We don't want to take in the difficulty of the choices before us now, all of them involving great cost and risk. Just stop it, we cry out. The pain is too great. The complexity is too much to bear. The helplessness is too frustrating. We want to flee, to hide, to be protected, and not to be responsible. To find a mother hen and hide under her wings. Like Kiev, Jerusalem is one of those complicated and fraught cities to this day. These and others like them, Rome, Berlin, Constantinople, have been symbols of power and hope and progress, at times places of pilgrimage and beacons of civilization, at other times of sacking, expulsion, conflagration, and tragedy. When Jesus arrived there, Jerusalem was already an ancient place of power and symbolism, the dwelling place of God for the people of God. Nothing that happened or happens in Jerusalem is not symbolic or important. And so here is Roman-occupied Jerusalem, full of nervous, fearful, anxious people, little chicks who don't know what to do, don't know they're in danger, and they're scattered all over. That's a lot of work for a mother hen. Now, part of the tension of Jerusalem in Jesus' time was the infighting among Jews. For not one Judaism, but many Judaisms were asserting themselves then. The Sadducees wanted to get along, to appease the Romans, and to keep their grip on the temple. The Zealots wanted to rise up and fight. The Essenes wanted to get out of Dodge, get off the grid, head for the hills. And the Pharisees, we sometimes forget that Jesus emerged out of the Pharisaic tradition. The Pharisees wanted a religious revival, to draw a hard line between themselves and the pagan Romans, to hold on to their tradition. To them, Jesus was a distraction, a radical, a heretic, and someone who was leading their community dangerously astray. Don't blame us, they told Jesus. It's Herod. Herod will kill you. Indeed, as far as Jesus' safety was concerned, it was ultimately Herod's town, Herod's even more than Pilate's. for Herod had been given jurisdiction over the Jews by the Romans. It was in Herod's temple where Jews gathered, and where Jesus had turned over the temple and preached his controversial gospel of the coming reign of God. Jesus was a political problem for Herod, whose position was dependent on keeping the Jews under control. And we know what Herod was capable of. This was the man who admired John the Baptist, and yet allowed him to be murdered on a whim. Herod will kill you, the Pharisees told Jesus. The fox is circling the chicken coop, and he is coming for you. Yet Jesus did not defend himself before them. Jesus knew exactly who Herod was and who he was to Herod, but he had only a little time left and he had work to do. And so Jesus did not react to the implied threat. Jesus did not think of himself. He instead felt compassion for the besieged in his beloved Jerusalem, where he had come to the temple as a boy and studied under Hillel and prayed and taught and healed. He saw Jerusalem as lost, a city in distress. Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the city that kills the prophets and stones those who are sent to it. How often have I desired to gather your children together, as a hen gathers her brood under her wings, and you were not willing. He is saying, I cannot save Jerusalem now, for that is not what I am here to do. Herod is going to do what Herods do. I'm here to do God's will. A mother hen doesn't have a lot of weapons against a fox. She has no sharp teeth. She can't outrun a fox. All she has is the instinct to spread her wings and gather her babies under them. Jesus chooses his fox and hen metaphor carefully. A mother hen is vulnerable to a fox. Jesus knows where he is going. The fox will kill the hen. But Jesus was the one whose mission was accomplished. Jesus triumphed over death. Herod is in the ash heap of history. The Roman Empire fell. Christ lives on in spirit. But you were not willing, Jesus said to us, and your house is left to you. And so we are asked to face the choices we have made and consider the condition of our house. Here we are in this world, we mortals, with what we have made out of God's gifts to us. It reflects our greatest achievements, the great beauty we are capable of, the discovery and invention that are fruits of our reason and skill. And it reflects also our wastage and selfishness and corruption and underhanded dealing as people. During Lent, we are asked to consider our part in this. Have we been good stewards of God's gifts? Have we kept our baptismal vows? Have we done what Micah said that God asks of us? To do justice, to love kindness, to walk humbly with our God. Cities and civilizations, it turns out, can rise and fall on these questions. Our house is left to us, said Jesus. The consequences of sin in this broken world can be heartbreaking. Jesus' heart was breaking in Jerusalem. Augustine was heartbroken by the fall of Rome to the Visigoths 400 years later. The world watched in horror as Berlin became the capital of a genocidal Reich. And now our hearts are breaking at the evil unfolding in Kyiv, and we are braced for more heartbreak ahead. Against the sin that gives way to such heartbreak, what do we chicks do? And where is our consolation? I would say first that we might resist chronocentrism. When we hear ourselves thinking, no one's ever had it this bad before, we might check our tendency to make our own time the apex of all human suffering. We remember that people have persevered through suffering. and so can we, if we are willing. Next, we can confront and confess various ways we have sinned and the sins done on our behalf that have contributed to the state of the world as it is today, and atone with reparations and restitution. We can do better. Third, we can take inspiration from those who have held out for love even against those who would destroy them. First, of course, Jesus. When I think of the people of Mother Emanuel Church in Charleston, we're still welcoming strangers into their midst, despite the murder of 9 of their own by a man bent on starting a race war. Their new pastor, Reverend Betty Clark, said, "We have to learn to love the hell out of other people." Or Martin Luther King, who went to Memphis despite the threats made against him and who was murdered there. He did what he came to do. We can act so that his truth marches on. I think of Volodymyr Zelensky, who has risen to this moment against all expectation, sustained by his faith, his conviction, and his love for his country. He is in great danger. He is staying anyway. There are certainly ways we can send support and aid to Ukraine. I mentioned the fundraiser at St. Aidan's. We gave you a list of organizations where you can help. But we as Christians can also be prayer warriors. Bishop Diana offered a reflection on events in Ukraine, reminding us first to recognize evil when we see it. She said, the quickest way to identify evil is to notice the absence of compassion, forgiveness, and love. The presence of these qualities make it nearly impossible for evil to take root. And the surest way to develop the capacity for compassion, forgiveness, and love is through prayer. She went on to say, prayer is a significant way for us to resist the evil powers of this world. Prayer has the power to transform us, our relationships, and our communities. Even in the midst of the forces of evil, prayer calls forth a strength and clarity that shines brightly and casts out the darkest of fears. For now, we, the people of love, must shine God's light, for only light and love can overcome darkness. Even the fiercest mother hen is no match for a fox. Jesus did not save himself. He went to the cross, and as he died, his chicks were not around him. They were scattered, and that must have broken his heart. But he did what he came to do. Surely that sacrifice and that love can be our light. May God have mercy on us all.